So Will Riley is not going to listen to me on whether he stays or goes, nor is he going to listen to any other fan. But an opinion that he might listen to is Terrence Shannon Jr.
You are Locked On Illini, your daily podcast on the Illinois Fighting Illini. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's what happens when you do a live show and you don't realize you're ready to go. Appreciate all of you for joining me. My name is Sunny Verma here on Locked On Illini. Thank you all so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Again, my name is Sunny. I'm here providing you daily coverage. I decided to go live tonight for whatever reason. I'm going to be traveling the next couple of days for a graduation. By the way, shout out to all the graduates, whether you're graduating this weekend or the following weekend, whatever it might be. Hit a like button if you know somebody graduating. It's a big time of the year, and you all worked hard for this moment. Speaking of working hard for this moment, today's episode, I kind of want to talk about something in the sense of Will Riley. Obviously, now with the recruitment of Andrej Stojakovic, it seems for the most part that this Illinois roster is settled. I think last count we had 11 or 12 scholarships already taken. I know you can technically, I think, have 15 right now, but I don't see Illinois going all that high, especially with the confirmation that we just got that Ben Hummerkaus is also going to be returning for next year. So the roster pretty much looks settled. And people ask me constantly, in particular in the Discord, which, by the way, the link should be in the description. It's Illini fans. We got 300 of us now all across the country talking Illini sports all day, every day. And a question that just constantly comes up is Will Riley. Is there money for Will Riley? And for today, just for kind of fun, I wanted to explore the idea of whether Will would want to come back or not. Now, full disclosure, I've said this before, my likelihood of Will coming back is at best 20%. I do think, especially if a guy like Jonathan Genovi has him as high as, I believe, 16 or 17. If he's in that 16, 17 range, it's an absolute no-brainer. Go do your thing, go make millions of dollars, and hopefully, succeed on a team that can use your skill set and get to that second contract like Ayo Dosunmu did. But one thing I did kind of notice, at least caught my attention last week, and that was during this Lakers and Minnesota Timberwolves playoff series. Both Kasparis and Will Riley were actually at the game, watching and supporting, I'm assuming, not necessarily their teammate, but their fellow Illini, Terrence Shannon Jr. And they both had pretty good seats. And that got me, basically assuming that obviously they've had discussions before and they've had conversations. And looking back on Terrence Shannon Jr.'s rookie year, I think collectively, us as Illinois fans, we're very frustrated. We're very excited at the idea when Terrence was drafted by Minnesota. But when he was drafted, Chris Finch sent him essentially immediately down to the development league. I believe that's what they call it now. And overall, Terrence only ended up playing 32 games all season long, despite what we all thought, and most draft experts thought, was an NBA-ready body and an NBA-ready game. And so to me, again, as I led off this episode, I was saying, Will Riley is not interested to hear what the fan base thinks, whether he's ready for the NBA or not. He probably already knows in his brain. But he's going to these NBA draft camps, and he's going to start getting feedback. And let's hope the best case scenario, he outperforms all expectations and he's going to get drafted high. Because, again, that's not only good for Will Riley. Trust me, that's good for the Illinois program. But what if he does struggle a little bit? What if he doesn't perform the way he is expecting to? And all of a sudden, those projections fall down to the late 20s, okay, mid to late 20s. Keep in mind, Terrence Shannon Jr. was drafted at 27. Now a decision needs to be made, okay? Terrence Shannon Jr., I believe, made about $3 million last year at the NBA level. And that doesn't, obviously, he didn't get to play in the NBA the entire season. He was down in the development league for a portion of that. Will Riley, let's be honest, I enjoyed Will Riley's freshman year here, but Will Riley at 19 years old is not nearly the player that Terrence Shannon Jr. was last year in an Illini uniform at 23. So if Terrence isn't ready for the NBA, I don't know if Will Riley is at all. And Will, let's be honest, Terrence's body was built for the NBA. He could have been in the NBA 2-3 seasons ago. But Will, kind of on the opposite. Look, Fletch has done wonders with Will's body, but he still has some growing to do. And I hate to say this, but I'm also being honest. I don't know if Will's game gets better in the D League. And so I do wonder, if I was in the same room with Will and with Terrence, what would Terrence say to Will? Is it worth it to not forego that $3 million? Because I think that Illinois could come up with that $3 million just by themselves in order to entice Will to come back. But would Will want to come back? Just keep in mind the transfer portal deadline is gone and over. So if Will does decide to return to college basketball, it's going to be for the Illini. So it's not like he can offer his services to the highest bidder or anything like that. But it really did get me thinking, just as I'm watching the Lakers in Minnesota, and just thinking about Terrence and seeing those two guys at the game, what kind of advice would Terrence give to Will? And to get some feedback, I invited one of my close friends and special guest, friend of the show, who, dare I say, is now an Illini writer, JR from the Writing Illini. JR, thanks for coming back on.
Listen, you changed my ways, Sunny. You just brought me on the show so much. I said I gotta at least start writing about this team if I'm going to talk about them so much. So yes, you can find written content from me over at writingillini.com. Great team over there. Really enjoy getting to meet all of them and put out, I think, 3 or 4 articles already. I'm going to try to put one out at least every other day. So yeah, go check it out. Get my takes and everything on Illinois specifically, some Big Ten stuff sprinkled in every now and then, but yeah, a lot of stuff over there.
So, Jared, you heard the first portion of this segment. Obviously you write about the Illini now, but you can at least come from a perspective that doesn't have the inherent bias that, as much as I try to avoid, I probably come with. What are your thoughts?
I think you make a lot of really good points. I think Terrence Shannon Jr., with what has happened to him in the league this season, has shown that a return to college is not always the worst thing in the world. I'm sure, yes, Will Riley wants to move on, get started with a professional career, just get into the league and do that stuff. But also, at the same time, if you go to a team like the Minnesota Timberwolves that were just in the playoffs, and they're not eliminated, right? The Bucks were eliminated by the Pacers. Are the Timberwolves still? They're up
3-1 on the Lakers. We're recording this right before the game starts. Full disclosure.
Right. Yeah. So they could, if you're watching this afterward, they could defeat the Lakers in Game 5. Like, that's incredible. So if that happens, that's just one more thing that could happen to Will Riley if he drops to below the 20s. He could get drafted by a team that already has a ready-made playoff roster, and he can find himself playing mostly in the G League rather than the actual NBA. And when he does play in the NBA, it could not be a great situation for him because he might not play any more than 5, 6, 7 minutes per game. And let's be honest, like, these guys want to play, right? Like, it no longer are the days of going to the NBA because you make more money. Yeah, you might not play as much, but you make more money. Like, yeah, if he gets drafted in the top 20, he'll probably make more money than he would make at Illinois. But if he gets drafted outside the 20, if he goes 25, 26, 27, like Terrence Shannon Jr., I think Illinois probably has the money to say, yeah, come back here for another year, increase that draft stock.
Yeah, again, I don't know if they'd have that amount of money. They had probably the market value a month ago, but again, $3 million is a lot of money, but it's hard to turn down a guy who could very well be an All-American. And let's just talk about that before we wrap things up. Like, the idea, this team itself, I think, is a top 3 potential team in the Big Ten Conference. But you slide in a guy like Will Riley and then have a starting lineup of, Boswell, Stojakovic, Riley, and, whether it's Merkovich or Z and Tomislav, you're not just talking about top 3 in the Big Ten Conference. You're talking a potential top 5, top 7 team in the entire country. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're correct. Right now, if Illinois just is the way they are, I think they're a top 2, top 3 team in the Big Ten next year. I was just telling you, I still don't think they're quite on Purdue level yet, but also Purdue is missing some athleticism on their team that could come back to bite them, and Brad Underwood might be able to expose that in a matchup against them. Now, I don't know if there's enough athleticism in the Big Ten for them to be able to expose that, but I got to be honest. I think Brad was going into the European League to look for some of these players with the specific idea of, I got to save some money for Will Riley just in case. And Dame Sarr was looking like a guy that could possibly do that. And Sunny, all the stuff you're saying, like potential All-American, Will Riley, like really found himself at the end of the year. You know, if Brad Underwood starts sending out those feelers, like, hey guys, it's a real possibility we could get Will Riley back. Like, does $3 million really sound like that much? A little bit here, a little bit there. Like, this is the way a lot of this NIL stuff works. And I think it was really, really savvy move by Brad Underwood to get pretty much the entire roster together at this point, really only needing Will Riley left. And I told you the other day, if they get Will Riley back, this is not just the starting lineup. This roster, to me, is on Purdue level with what their roster is looking like. And dare I say, I might even think about putting Illinois #1 over Purdue in this power. Like, that's one of the big reasons why I'm not doing power rankings right now very much for the Big Ten, because there still are a lot of dudes out there. Will Riley being one of them. We'll talk about a couple other guys here in a minute when we do our winners and losers of the transfer portal. But these 1 or 2 players for teams could really change the entire Big Ten next year.
And again, the benefit is not just for Illinois, right? Again, if he goes in the late 20s, as I said, Terrence made about $3 million. Let's just say hypothetically, for the sake of conversation, Illinois is able to come up with that $3 million. Well, as we just talked about, the team is pretty loaded, and a team that could absolutely not just make Sweet 16 expectation would be the bare minimum at that point. But Wills has the potential to be an all Big Ten guy, potentially even an All-American type of player. He's only going to be 20 years old if he forgoes this year and enters the draft next year. He can absolutely, in my opinion, shoot himself up to a top 15 pick or top 10 pick. And now you're talking about your starting NBA contract starting at $7 or $8 million. And, then all of a sudden the math really starts mathing. And, that's why I'm trying to say this is not, of course, it's a dream scenario for Illinois, but I really think that there's a route here that it actually would make sense for Will as well.
Yeah, no, I totally think it would. Now, the big thing is, does this communication actually happen? Does Will Riley actually think about this? I'm sure Will Riley's probably got more voices in his ear than, what Terrence Shannon Jr. is doing in the league right now, but it could always be a factor. And Brad, like, Brad's going to use anything and everything he can. You best believe he's still in contact with Will Riley right now. He is still doing everything he can, making sure he knows, hey, you want to come back, you got a place here, you got a home at Illinois, we're going to treat you right, you're going to get paid right, and you're going to increase your draft stock for next year, so you don't have to worry about not being top 20, because next year, you're looking at probably more like top 15, top 10, if you have a good enough year.
All right, hit the like button if you think Will coming back could make this a Final Four team. I know those are very high standards, but I absolutely think that's possible. We'll have more right after this. Did you know Fire TV is also on Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign in to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to go. Dive into hundreds of premium titles, including EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty, as easily as you can stream your favorite show. Look, I'm traveling tomorrow. It'd be so nice that, I got so much to pack as is. I don't want to pack a video game system so this giving me the opportunity to play without packing the console, it's a no-brainer. Just head on over to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. And welcome back. We got 111 people watching and 31 likes, guys. Speaking of mathing, that's not working out for me. Let's get to 100 likes on this episode. It's a Wednesday evening, live. Just, let's banter. I figured we'd do this. Next up, we're going to be talking about the transfer portal. I think most of the noise is kind of done. So, now it's the time to sit back. We've all got to view this through an Illinois lens. But I wanted to ask JR, what's going on with the whole Big Ten in general? Who are the big winners and the big losers when building their roster this way? I mean, let's be honest, JR, at this point, it's arguable, and I'd argue it's not arguable, that it's more important to build your roster through the transfer portal now than it is through prep recruiting.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to get immediate needs through the transfer portal. We see certain teams trying to build specifically through recruiting, and that works sometimes. Purdue obviously right now is doing a pretty good job of, keeping their guys who are recruits and then bringing in a couple guys here and there through the transfer portal to add to what they already have. But you also see a team like Michigan State where they are trying to build through recruiting, and I would say the transfer portal is not going so well for them right now. So, I mean, if you want to start there, I actually have Michigan State as one of my losers in the transfer portal right now, alongside Penn State and Rutgers. Now, I don't think anybody here is surprised by Penn State and Rutgers, but you look at this Michigan State class, and there's really not all that much that really excites me. I mean, Trey Fort from Samford, he's a nice guard. I don't think he's anything spectacular. I don't think he's going to fill the void of Jace Richardson or Jaden Akins. And then Caleb Glenn is another good forward from Florida Atlantic, but kind of same thing with him. I don't think he's going to fill the void of the scoring that needs to happen. And you lost Trey Holloman. I don't care as much as Michigan State fans when I say, oh, he wasn't actually all that good. We just loved his energy. I don't care. It doesn't vibe for me. Trey Holloman was too good of a player to lose, and you didn't land Darius Adams out of recruiting. So I know we're not here to talk a bunch about Michigan State, but that's probably one of my big losers I have.
Hey, look, us Illini fans, we're not very big fans of Michigan State after this past season. So as long as we're not praising them, I think you can talk Michigan State all you want. And yeah, I'll be honest, I've been tuning over to Matt Sheehan at Locked On Spartans periodically over the last couple of weeks, and yeah, I think you nailed the mood right on the head. It's one of those where it's okay, kind of fake enthusiasm, okay, we got this guy, let's spin this as positively as we can get. But I talked about this coming into the offseason, right? People were talking about Tom Izzo, including people in this my own comment section, talking about how Brad needs to be more like Tom Izzo, and I always thought that was ridiculous. Tom, this is the first time Tom Izzo's dealing with this transfer portal. He's never really had to utilize this with unexpected roster moves. And quite honestly, it doesn't matter. Offseason grades don't matter. But just looking at the roster so far, I think it's been a net negative for Izzo and the Spartans. And so, it's going to be interesting for me to see how he continues to build this team moving forward.
Yeah, you're relying a lot on development and guys getting better, which comes through sometimes, but it's just not the traditional way of doing it right now in college basketball. So we'll see what Tom Izzo can do. We'll go to my winners next, and then I actually have some neutrals as well that I want to get your take on, Sunny, and see what you think. So my winners are Iowa and Indiana. They're basically rebuilding their rosters, and I just really like what they've done, putting players together, getting competition and stuff like that. Washington is a winner as well. They've been throwing a ton of money at the transfer portal, and they've been getting guys back. They got Wesley Yates back from USC. I think that was huge for them, kind of gives them a star player to build off of. I think Wesley Yates is a much better player to be your star than Great Osobor. Nothing against Great Osobor. He was a player that wasn't necessarily star material in the sense of how he plays his game, not his talent, but just how his game is played. Nebraska and Wisconsin. I actually also have Nebraska more so. They didn't really lose anybody. They lost Bryce Williams and Juwan Gary to graduation, but they didn't really lose any players. So Fred Hoiberg did a really good job. They won the crown, and everybody just kind of stuck around. And it's like, all right, these guys obviously believe in something. So I don't know if they're going to be good next year, but the fact that they didn't really lose anybody of significance, I think says something to me. And then Wisconsin, I just like what they're doing to put the players together that fit. And then my very last one, Sunny, I actually was almost going to put this team in neutral. And then I said, you know what? It's hard because Illinois, it's the wording of it, right? Transfer portal winners and losers. because if we are just talking transfer portal, it's hard to say Illinois is a winner because you look at what Illinois has done. They got Stojakovic, which is obviously huge, and they got Big Z, but they also lost Dre Gibbs Lawhorn, Morez Johnson, and Trey White, a couple other guys, but those guys, sorry, Kerry Booth. Like it's one of those things where you lose a few of these guys and maybe you didn't necessarily want to lose them. However, at the same time, I cannot understate how big of an addition or I can't overstate how big of an addition Andrej Stojakovic was. Like, that was just such a huge addition to this team. Even if you're saying, oh, well, they added too many European players, so that's not actually transfer portal. Andrej Stojakovic just goes with who these players are. He gives them so much on offense with what they're able to do now. So even though they lost 3 or 4, 5, I think, in the transfer portal, they only added 2. I'm still going to call them a winner because I think they replaced what they lost for the most part. Now, I will say, I'll get pushback from that on people with Big Z, saying Big Z isn't as good as Morez Johnson. And I think Morez Johnson, I would probably rather have Morez Johnson on my team if they were a traditional team, but Illinois is not a traditional team. So Morez Johnson doesn't fit this team the same way that Big Z does. So from a fit perspective, I think the Big Z addition was better than keeping Morez Johnson around.
Yeah, I was curious on how we were going to grade Illinois just for that reason, because it's odd. It's odd, like the wording that you use. It's like it's transfer portal, so it's not prep recruiting. So it's not like Merkovich and Petrovic, like these guys we got from high school, but it's not really transfer portal, or it kind of is transfer portal because they're playing professionally. They're coming from different organizations and coming to Illinois. There just needs to be a new word, and maybe I kind of shoehorned you in with the idea of the title of being a transfer portal. But yeah, overall, I agree. It's when you think about last year's roster, would I have liked Trey White to come back? Absolutely. I think Trey White played a very solid 4 spot here, but he obviously wanted to play a different style. He wanted the ball in his hands more often, and I just don't know if he's going to be a successful player doing that. Morez Johnson, I talked about this. He was my favorite player on last year's team, and it hurt losing him. But, and I assure you, I'm not trying to be biased when I say this, I think the hurt is more emotional than it is what we're losing on the basketball court. He was an elite rebounder, and he very efficient scorer in the sense that you never had to run anything for him. But when it comes to the other aspects of his skill set, there's still needed to develop more. I really like what I saw of this Merkovich kid, both at the Nike Hoop Summit and at the game that he just played against Petrovic. I believe it was on Tuesday evening. He really looks a lot better than I had initially thought he was going to be. And, Big Z, I always say Big Z is going to be one of my X factors because, yeah, he had a disappointing end to last season, but he got an entire offseason to work with Fletch and, more importantly, with Orlando Antigua, one of the best big men developers in the entire country. And, I can't wait to see what Z looks like next year. That's why a lot of people are saying, there's no way Zvonimir can be a starter on this team, play at the 4 spot. I can see that a scenario where Brad and Orlando try it. Let's see if it works. If it doesn't work, they can always adjust later. But, again, the net of having, would you rather have Morez and Trey White or Zvonimir and David Merkovich? Probably still the former, but the gap is not that big.
I'd rather have Andrej Stojakovic and Big Z for this Illinois team than Trey White and Morez Johnson. Now, you'll get people who say, well, they aren't as talented as him. Well, they also don't fit the, Morez and Trey White at this point do not fit this team better than Andrej Stojakovic and Big Z do. Now, they'll have to figure it out, who's going to be starting, stuff like that. I wrote an article saying that I think Merkovich is going to start. However, it wouldn't surprise me if Big Z is a starter in this situation. So let me give you my neutrals, and we'll see what your thoughts are on these teams, and I'll kind of give you why I think I'm back and forth with them a little bit. So USC did add Rodney Rice and what's his name? Mazar. He's got 3 names or something like that. Baker Mazzaro.
Baker
That's
Mazzaro,
right.
yeah. Illinois after.
I can't remember. Chad Baker Mazzaro. I don't know how Chad Baker-Mazzaro and Eric Musselman are going to do on the same team together. I'm convinced if they win an NCAA tournament game, both of them are just going to be running around shirtless the court the entire time. Who knows? They might lose their pants too. We'll see. But that's an interesting one to me because they did lose. They did lose Wesley Yates and Desmond Claude, and it sounds like Desmond Claude is just kind of going to Florida to get some money there. We'll see where he ends up, but I don't really like the idea of losing your 2 stars to bring in 2 more stars. And when Chad Baker-Mazzaro, you're going to be putting that much, trust in him with how erratic he seems to be. It's a little scary to me. So I have USC as neutral. I'm not going to say they're winner or loser. They're kind of in the middle. Ohio State, I have as a neutral too. They brought back some talent, did a good job bringing back 3 of their 4 best players. And then right now they're in it for Darian Williams. If they sign Darian Williams and he doesn't go to the draft, I think they're a winner. If they don't, I don't think I'd put them losers, but I'd probably keep them in the neutral just because they didn't lose the guys that they wanted to keep. Well, really the only one that they lost that they wanted to keep was Sean Stewart, and I don't think that was such a bad one to lose. Purdue only signed 2 players out of the transfer portal. They're kind of similar to Illinois in that perspective. So, yes, they did get Omer Mayer, but, they got Clough and Liam Murphy, who I think fit better, but at the same time, this is also a program that has prided themselves on the transfer portal this entire time, or not, no transfer portal this entire time. And that was a big moniker of their program and everything else. So, I mean, when you take into account, you got the fan base kind of flipping now and saying, oh yeah, we love the transfer portal. It's like, yeah, do you really? Because now it seems like you just got to go with the way it goes. And then finally, Michigan, I think it all hinges on Yaxel Lindeberg, kind of like Ohio State. They, if Lindeberg comes, they're a winner for sure. If he doesn't come, you got some nice pieces with Elliot Cadeau and Rez Johnson, but I also don't. I'm not an Elliot Cadeau believer yet. Maybe he just needs another year of development to prove it, but we'll see what happens. What's your thoughts on those 4 teams?
I do think Michigan would be a winner, just because I do think the incoming talent is better than the outgoing. But I'm not as high on Michigan as a lot of other people are right now, just because of the fit. I don't think the team is necessarily set yet and ready to contend for a Big Ten championship the way they are, at least as of today, the way the roster is set up. USC, I'm very intrigued by. USC is one of those teams where I think they have a fantastic head coach, but as when you give Musselman really good players, he's dangerous. But so a lot of that culture was changed by a lot of their good players also leaving. So it's just, we have an emotional Baker-Mazzaro. Is that his name?
Chad Baker-Mazzaro.
Yeah, Chad Baker-Mazzaro. So it's like, we'll see how that one kind of works out. Let me know in the comment section, who are your winners and losers of this transfer portal? Do you consider Illinois a winner? Again, I think it's a pretty even trade-off, but I want to hear your thoughts. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. And you can stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Me personally, I'm spending way too much money going out to eat. I got 2 kids. I'm tired. It's easy to go get food from the fast food restaurant. I know I got to keep that in check. And with Monarch Money, instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. And we're back. We appreciate all of you guys joining. If you haven't already, make sure you hit the like on this video. We got 45 likes and 132 people watching. So let's get that closer to even. Before I end the show, I figured we'd get to at least some of the comments. Joseph says, if Riley came back, this is a top 5 team and Purdue can hold our beer. Joseph, I like the enthusiasm, but The problem is right now, I think Purdue's a top 1 team. JR?
Yeah. You talk about chemistry, and those guys have been playing together for a long time. It's going to be good throughout the entire season. They really don't need time to gel. That's one of the biggest things with them.
Jay asks, I thought this ship has sailed. Not to my knowledge. Again, I don't think it's likely, so I don't want anyone going forward saying Sunny says Will Riley's coming back. That's not it at all. This is simply a hypothetical situation where I'm trying to live in the moment and seeing Terrence and Will Riley. Obviously, they're communicating. Will's supporting Terrence and being at the basketball games. I figured it was worth a conversation. Philip says, probably would take $3 to $4 million to get Will Riley back. I mean, those numbers sound outrageous right now, and it would have sounded crazy even 2 months ago. But Phil's probably right.
We got. I know this is a different sport. We got Texas football spending $40 million on their roster. I don't think anything's outrageous at this point. I know
saw
this
that.
is basketball and not football, but geez.
William says, I would still like to see another guard ball handler. Happy to see Ben back. William, I would too, but I don't think they have any roster spots open at this point. I think they're pretty tapped out when it comes to the financials. I've said this before, and I still stand by it. There is a emergency break glass fund for Will, but I don't know if it's for today's market prices. I know it was for about a month and a half, 2 months ago. So this is why we're having that conversation now. Kenosha says Will Riley will be the best player in the draft. Now that's enthusiasm. I'm not sure about that. And then we have the counterbalancing. Meow Peep says Riley isn't in the first round anymore. So if Kenosha's right, someone's about to get a steal. Caitlin says, I'd love Will to come back. Don't know how it would work, but it would be fun. I think it would. I think it would easily work. Essentially, you would have Will and Andre play the Will and Kasparis role from last year. The only difference is Will Riley is a year older and a year better, and Andrej Stojakovic this upcoming season, I think, is going to be a better player than Kasparis was as an 18-year-old. Jerry, you agree?
Yeah. I think it would fit together well. At the end of the day, in basketball, you got talent, you'll fit it together well.
Phil also says that with Will Riley back, Illinois is better than Purdue. I think there's an argument to be had. I'm not going to say that definitively. Again, I hopefully no Purdue fans stumble into this. I like their roster, and I really like that center that they brought in, Clough or Kloof or whatever it was, and he's exactly what the team needed last year. And so now that they've brought him in, I'm not looking forward to that. Alan says
they don't have much depth. They got to stay healthy if they want to really contend. Sorry, go ahead.
Alan says some currently signed players will not be happy to lose minutes if Will Riley comes back. Alan, that very well may be the case, but there's not a single other player on this roster who would have the impact that Will would have. And so if that were the case and they wanted to explore different options down the road, that's fine. But you do what you can do to get Will Riley back in your building. Philip says next year's draft is not as top heavy as this year's. I couldn't tell you. I haven't really been paying attention to the NBA draft stuff. SI Sportsman says a return to Illinois for Will Riley would benefit him very much. I really do think there's a path. Again, if he's projected in the mid-teens, go get paid. Go be an NBA player for the rest of your career. But if things don't work out, I do think there's an honest conversation at the very least to have if he falls in the 20s. Jay says, never count out Izzo. No one thought they were going to be good last year. Jay, I'm not. I'm genuinely not. All I'm saying is my Michigan State friends were ready to fire him 2 years ago, where he was an 8 seed and where he was a 9 seed. I would argue the norm now is him underperforming compared to, I would consider last year right now the fluke. And again, I'm very interested to see how he manages this portal. And as JR already alluded to earlier, right now the results don't look all that positive.
I think some people, and I'm not saying Jay is, I'm just saying I don't think some people give Jace Richardson enough credit for what he actually did for that team. Like Jaden Akins was a volume shooter for them, and he helped out in a lot of those ways. But if Jaylee Akins was your guy by himself, terrible efficiency. But if you had, Jace Richardson was a huge piece to actually make them what they were last year.
Demetrius says, man, if Riley comes back, Illinois is a Final Four contender. If he needs $3 million, we'll start a GoFund if we need it. Beatrice, yeah, I don't think that's necessarily, but I'm sure Icon will absolutely accept whatever funds you're ready to donate. Philip says, Morez is a point guard, don't you know? Philip, also Mr. Morez's father. Philip also says Illinois portal winners because of the jumpsuit Brad memes. Yeah, absolutely. Jay says Morez is not a score. Move on. Who cares? We were talking transfer portal, so I've got to bring up his name because he was arguably the biggest loss that we had. Con Rizzle says, outside of Boswell, this team is soft. Ty wasn't even tough enough to transfer out after redshirting. Thank you for your input, Con Rizzle. Mike says, after your time of thinking about it, I wouldn't mind Ben coming back. I think we need someone with defense, and he can play defense. I mean, not one-on-one individual defense, but he's a smart basketball player, and I think positionally he knows where to be. And whether it's all talk, which Brad Underwood does like to hype up his own players, he did talk about Ben a lot when it comes to being not quite quarterback of the defense, but just being very vocal on the defensive end. All right, I'm going to wrap it up there. JR, can you let the folks know one more time where they can find your work?
Yeah, the Big Ten Huddle is the Big Ten content. Talk plenty football and basketball. 2 separate channels for that. The Big Ten Huddle dash football if you want that. The Big Ten Huddle dash basketball if you want that. Going to put out an Illinois video here soon about Stojakovic and everything there. So some good stuff. And then also putting out 1 or 2 articles every day or two on writingillini.com over there at Fansided. So that's where you can find my written work. So and all the Illinois-centric work, not just Big Ten over there, Illinois-centric.
Slowly, the conversion of JR into a full-blown Illini fan is in operation. Thanks, JR.
Thank you.
And that's going to wrap it up for this edition of Locked On Illini. Again, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that like button on your way out. Just know I appreciate each and every one of you. I've got some good videos lined up for you this week. We should hear about the Trey Taylor decision very, very soon. And, we'll talk about that in a future episode as well. Until next time, ILL. Love you guys.